Hi. My favorite genre of book is self-help, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit it. Not really, but kind of. So one thing I really enjoy seeing in TV and movies is how people find themselves, like a very good self-actualization story. Because for me, I feel like I've constantly been trying to work on myself and trying to be a better person, but it's interesting when you see it in other forms and other media, so you can kind of look at them and see how you kind of apply or don't apply. And I feel like The Brother's Son does a really good job of showing how people find themselves or talk, more about how they become the real versions of themselves. For instance, Michelle Yeoh's character becomes the leader of a group that she's always wanted to be, but just kind of hasn't told anyone. But she really, really wants it for herself, and in the end, she gets it. I feel like Bruce is another great example because he has a version of himself who he thinks is himself, but he kind of is hiding it with his improv, and at the end he kind of embraces it, and despite the fact that his life is basically turned in 1,000 different ways just from the plot, he really does seem to know who he is for the first time, and he's very accepting of it. But my favorite character going through all of this is Charles. I think Charles is a really interesting character because he kind of follows this motto that they use in improv, which I like, which is yes and basically for him it is, I feel like when the show starts, he's kind of he's got some things about him that most people don't know, and that he is finally kind of able to be himself in a lot of ways and show other people. He really does enjoy baking, and he's even watching the Great British Bake Off as he is sort of doing the opening fight, which I think is really interesting. But during the whole thing, and he's also baking at the time, when people come into his apartment that are from the group, they kind of know what he's doing but don't really know. It seems like it's something that he's kind of hiding but not really hiding. And I like how Charles' character arc, part of it is just him being more vocal in front of other people about his hobbies and his interests. Because in a lot of ways, from the very start of the show, Charles is the full version of himself in most people's eyes. He seems like he really knows who he is, he really likes certain things, but he doesn't really show other people, and he doesn't really let other people in. He's sort of like a one-man show kind of thing. He is kind of in his own ecosystem of sorts. And what I find really interesting about the show is that it's kind of opening Charles up. Not so much as changing who he is. It's sort of this yes and principle where he is, the fighter, the oppressor, the big brute of the gang, the triad. But it's not like he is someone who is, doesn't have other facets of his personality, which I think at the start of the show, that's what he really shows. It's he's very cunning, he's very smart, he's brutal in some instances, but he's not really showing his full breadth of himself. One of the first moments that I think that we really see him start to see himself as a transformed person, or even trying to open up, is when he's in Alexis's apartment and he's sort of decorating for her, he's unboxing all of her moving boxes, and he is organizing and kind of rearranging the space to make it feel like an actual home. Now, he's not doing a great job of it because the shelf falls over, which is really funny, but it's more of him. It's more than just he's a fighter. He has other things that he enjoys. And I think this is the first time in the show where he actually shows off his baking to somebody and he has them try it. Because leading up to it, I mean, he's in the family kitchen and he's kind of just trying to clean up the mess. So he's not really cooking anything. And even the mom is kind of no, don't make me anything. I'll make you something. And he's never really put in any position beforehand that's shown where he's having to make his meal for other people. But after he does this for Alexis and they have their falling out, he still he doesn't totally disregard, I think, his baking for other people, because when they go to John Cho's house, he's making snacks for the whole group. And just the reactions and the way that people were kind of talking to him during the whole thing, it does seem like this is the first time where he's really shared his creations with someone else. It's really interesting to me because it seems like it's very difficult for him to open up during the whole camping out at the at the mansion, but he is really trying to become more of himself. And I just find Charles to be a very interesting person, just in terms of how he is trying constantly, in kind of a Roy Kent way in season 3 of Ted Lasso to me, where he's trying to say, I'm going to do like this, and this, and I'm going to be a better person, and I'm going to do all this. But it doesn't always work out for him, and it's really difficult to like see the pathway forward. Like he tries to reach out back to Alexis, and she kind of disregards his call, and he goes on that barrage against the Korean gang that has TK. And so like that's kind of like for him where he could have become back to his more former self. And I think the ending is really interesting too, because in a lot of self-help books, I really get like dissuaded by them, or I don't really find any enjoyment whatsoever in them when they tell you like, you need to be this whole new person. You need to be like, if you're waking up like at 8:30 to go to work and you have to be there by 9, you should start getting up at 5:30. You should start like saying no to all your friends. You should like totally like reinvent yourself, because for me that's like not realistic at all, and it's not anywhere. You're not ever going to be able to maintain that level. Because you might be able to do it for a week, a month, if you're really, really into it, probably 2 months. But after that, you sort of like fall off and you're saying like, it just didn't work out. And so you try and you go and do some other thing that's like some fad or whatever. But that one thing that you tried, maybe, in the long term, it would have helped possibly, or it might not have. But you tried to do such a 180 that it's impossible for you to move forward. That's kind of what I like about the ending of The Brother's Son, is because when Charles is like starting his baking business and you're thinking like, oh really, he's like going to go this far, this hard into like doing something new. To me, it didn't really make sense. And so that's why I kind of liked the, I guess, twist, if you will, where Charles gets back on the plane with his mom to go back to Taiwan. And it's sort of like, oh yeah, of course he's going to do this, because this is kind of who he is. Like he did a lot of things that, this is like part of his person, is to be this person who is like the leader of the keeping the peace of these triads, and he is like a weapon in his own way. But I think like what a lot of it gets to, for me at least, and why I enjoyed it so much, is because it's like saying like you are yourself, and you can add little things here and there, and maybe that'll make you a better person. But the way to find who you are as a person is to like take baby steps towards it, and not. Then part of it for me is that like it's not a complete reinvention of the character. Like he didn't start out in episode 1 of being somebody and then being a completely different person by the end of episode 8 of this season. It's sort of like over episode 1, 2, 3, and 4, like, each episode he becomes a lot friendlier to Bruce. He becomes a lot friendlier to the other people around him. Like he's more interested and more empathetic of what people are trying to say to him. But it's slow, and it's not like a complete reversal. So him going back and him wanting to still retain his former position isn't, I think, something so out of character for me. I think it makes a lot of sense for his character. I think it makes a lot of sense for the show, and I really enjoyed it. I like the idea that he is trying to become a better person, and he's trying to show people his interest and trying to be in his own mind his better self. But it's not like him saying like, oh today I'm gonna be a baker, I'm gonna forget that all the stuff I did years and years and years ago, because to me that would be really unrealistic. And I think that's why I enjoyed the show so much, just because as much as it isn't like a realistic show or all these other things, I feel like the character and the character decisions were realistic. So that's really why I enjoyed it. But yeah, I think the whole show is about like finding yourself, and really this whole first season. Maybe they'll change it in season 2. I'm not sure, but it seems like this first season is just like finding out who you are, like acting and doing things that make you. I think it's really hard for a lot of TV shows to show character development as like it goes on, because you kind of are starting to write a certain character. So this also makes a lot of sense for me, like from a writing perspective. Is like it's easier to write a character who makes little things in his character progression instead of just like this like wave and this massive shift. I also do like how the dad kind of talks about how everyone who goes to America kind of goes through this transition, because I do think like finding yourself is like a more individualistic behavior. It's definitely like not as protect the family as some other things are. It's not like a communal structure, I guess. And so he is sort of, and so Charles kind of is like that person who is really growing into himself, and I just really enjoyed it. So let me know your thoughts, and I will see you later. Bye.